Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Thursday, December the 19th, which makes this the news for December 18th, 2024, day 1029 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And I see the peeps are coming in. There's Vanetta. Hey, Clay Fry. Daryl Roberts is here. How you living, man? Hey, Darlene. Welcome back. I promise I will do everything I can to be on my best behavior this evening. Hello, Debbie. Hello, Chef Deb. How's everybody doing? Did you miss me? Hey, Mad Mike. Hey, Bip. I assume that's Bip, right? It's not Veer. Or is it Veer? Little Red Sunflower missed us. Hey, V. Welcome, Michigan. I'm trying, Daryl. I'm trying so hard, man. I'm trying so hard. Hey, Steve B. Howdy. Well, thanks, Chef Deb. Are you finding that content valuable? Hey, Bobby. I was cooking last week, and poof, I was gone. That's the thing that kills me about this particular ban. I was banned for hate speech while I was baking Christmas cookies. I wasn't even talking about the news. Not really. Anyway. All right, so guys, we are back and better than ever. Hey, Anthony. We are back and better than ever. Live at 5, coming to you live from Kyiv, this major European capital under siege from the aggressor state, which last night fired 51 drones. No, wait, is that right? Yes, 51. No, I'm wrong. Sorry. Hold on, wait a second. Oh, geez, now I'm not sure. I wrote this. No, they fired, if I'm not mistaken, we can check my blue sky too. But if I'm not, it was 81, says Chef Deb. Thank you, Chef Deb. Fired 81 drones at the territory of Ukraine last night. 51 were shot down. 30 were taken out with now this is really interesting to me. For the last 2 months, just the last 2 months, maybe 3 months now, we've been hearing from the Air Force every day that so many drones were lost. They were lost. And nobody has explained what lost means. And I made the assumption that, thanks, Lars, nice to be back. But I made the assumption that they had some kind of an electronic warfare countermeasure to the drones. And maybe they do. But there were 30 lost last night. And on Monday, we learned that the Ukrainians got prototypes of the Dragonfire laser weapon from the British, and that they have been using it here in Ukraine. According to the Deputy Minister of Defense, who was speaking at a European defense contractor conference on Monday, he said Ukraine is now the 5th country on earth to have a laser weapon capability. Now, there's a big difference between having a weapon and having a capability. And he seemed to be indicating that Ukraine's new Trident laser weapon is a capability, which I have to ask the question, have they been taking down drones with lasers? How fucking cool is that? Right now, we don't know that to be true yet. But today, for the first time ever, the Ukrainian Air Force announced that 30 drones were lost due to active countermeasures. They finally acknowledged that the lost drones are from active countermeasures. And I do find it interesting that they made that announcement after announcing that they have the laser weapon. So we don't know how they're getting lost, if it's electronic warfare, if it's lasers, or what it is. But I look forward to finding out. Now, if you do the math, they shot down 51. 30 were neutralized with active countermeasures. That means a total of 81 drones were taken out last night. That's 100% interception rate. No reports of hits, no reports of casualties. And that is, if I'm not mistaken, it is the fourth night in the last week where the interception rate was 100 or nearly 100%. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. As a segue to my next question, or to my next topic here, Anthony asked the question, has Russia responded to the general that got killed? This is just the topic that we're coming to, Anthony. Officially, they are vowing retribution. Now, in the mill blogger community, the mill bloggers are pissed. They are not happy about it. One mill blogger has called for immediate retribution. Another mill blogger has said, and this is interesting because there's an implicit kind of Soviet speak, Russian propaganda nightmare speak that's actually critical of the Kremlin. This mill blogger said in a post that it would be better to send missiles to take out high-ranking Ukrainian politicians and journalists and politicians in the same boat, rather than send thousands of missiles uselessly against Ukrainian infrastructure. Now, there's a backhand slight there at the Kremlin, right? Because, of course, that's the policy that the Kremlin is pursuing and has been pursuing. So I found that particularly interesting. Now, who is this guy? Let's talk a little bit about Lieutenant General Kirollov. Lieutenant General, that's as high as you get. This is the biggest fish that the Ukrainians have fried. And we can argue the kind of morality of these kinds of strikes, though that's a point that could be argued. But one has to stand in awe, absolute awe, of the professionalism of this execution, the sublime nature of it. These guys had cameras posted so that they were live streaming what was happening. They were seeing in real time when the target, and only the target, came into range of the device. The device itself, 300 grams of TNT. That's a little less than 11 ounces for the Americans. Enough to unalive a person at close range, was not secured to the bottom of that scooter. Rather, it was hidden inside the handlebars so that it was right at hip height, right where all of your internal organs are, where if there's damage to those, you're done, right? The execution was remote through the live stream. And this is where we get to a really interesting point, because the Russians have arrested 2 people and claim that they have a confession from them. And this is very important. Follow this, guys, because I think it's bullshit, right? The one guy is Uzbeki. We don't have any details on the other guy. Now, remember back when the Crocus Hall got hit? What did they do? They rounded up a bunch of Tajiks and beat them and tortured them in the most awful of ways until they confessed to Crocus Hall. Nobody thinks those were the people that actually did it. And I don't think that these are the people that did it either. And here's why. In his confession, the Uzbek guy very clearly says, I was watching the live stream from the cameras I set up, and when the general came into view, I executed the detonation. That's the claim he's making in his confession. No, that's not what the FSB said happened. The FSB released a statement before his confession was released in which they said that it was the SBU agents in Dnipro watching the live feed. And they blamed the agents in Dnipro for pushing the button. So right off the bat, the Russians can't even keep their lies straight, right? Which is de rigueur for the Russians. There's going to be more lies about this. We'll talk about some of them that are coming out already. But the statement from the FSB on how this transpired is in contradiction to the suspect's confession. To me, it looks much more like what the Russians do. They grab immigrant labor, Central Asians, former Soviet republics, they beat them until they confess, and then they dispose of them. And that way they put a neat little bow on the crime, and someone has been punished for it. And that's the message that they want to send the Russian people. What message does this neutralization of the lieutenant general send to the upper echelons of the Russian military and every single person in the Russian hierarchy that is also participated in war crimes or is guilty of war crimes? They must be walking to work looking at every scooter that there is, right? There's talk in the city of Moscow of passing a law that no scooter can be left within 2 meters of a door or some shit. That's not going to do much of anything, right? That's just... So what I think is happening among a certain segment of Russian society in Moscow is they're shitting themselves. They're shitting themselves and they're paranoid that they could be next. Right, Colin? The message is you are not safe anywhere. I keep saying it, right? I keep saying it. Don't fear the bear, Ukraine. Fear her. And this is the evidence. Now, this guy, man, this guy was a high-profile guy. He wasn't some anonymous general that was sitting behind a desk somewhere or out in the field somewhere hidden from the people. Oh, no. This guy was on the TV all the time. He was on Russian state TV all the time. He was a major mouthpiece for Putin. And it's interesting because it just goes to the point of how different the mindset is in the West versus Russia. Because this guy was in charge of the biological, radiological, and chemical warfare division of his forces, right? Well, in the United States, if you're in charge of those things, you're in charge of figuring out how to defend against them. His job was to figure out how to use them. And one of the things that he has been charged with and is clearly guilty of is the use of chloroperoquine on the people, on Ukrainian soldiery. Now, this predecessor of CS gas is an oily, viscous substance that causes blistering to the skin, blinds you, right? Causes severe eye irritation. If you're exposed to too much of it, your lungs will fill up with fluid and it will unalive you. So it is a nasty, nasty thing that is outlawed by the Chemical Weapons Treaty, which Russia is a signatory to. And so, and it's interesting too, if you look at all the advances in Pokrovsk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, all the Pokrovsk push, you know what they're using on the Ukrainian troops there. They're using these chemical agents. That's how they're getting the advances. If it weren't for that, we don't know where the line would be right now. So it is, thanks. It's good to be back, Neil. Hey, Flip. Hey, Pugga Mahone. Hey, Nicola Jones. So, as the SBU said in its statement, this was clearly a legitimate target. He is the most senior general ever assassinated in this conflict. To quote the SBU, retribution for war crimes is inevitable. And essentially, this guy's fate is the fate of all those war criminals that have perpetrated evil against the Ukrainian people. We're coming for you. That's the message that they are sending clearly. Now, when Kirollov, when Kirollov was on the state TV, what kind of shit was he saying? This guy was a real shit talker, boy. He came up with some doozies. Let's see. He accused Britain and Ukraine of collaborating on a dirty bomb. He accused the U.S. of genetically modifying mosquitoes to bring poison and infect Russians with poison mosquitoes. He accused the U.S. of having biolabs. The whole biolabs bullshit story comes from him. He's the source of that. And, you know, in the United States, the far right blames China, the boogeyman, China, for creating COVID. But in Russia, they blame the United States for creating COVID. And there is a conspiracy theory already that is spreading, being promulgated by this guy, Pepe Escobar, in Brazil, that it wasn't the Ukrainians that unalived him, but rather it was the CIA. Of course, it's always the CIA. And it was because he tried to tell the world the truth about how the USA manufactured COVID-19. Forget the fact that COVID-19 started in China like all of these viruses do. I mean, that's nature at work. Okay, now it is worth mentioning. I guess it's worth. I mean, I don't think that this Uzbek guy did it, but in his confession, he clearly says that he was hired by the Ukrainian security services, and he was offered $100,000 to carry out this attack. Now, again, I think the guy is a scapegoat. I think the discrepancy between the FSB report and his own confession is good evidence that the whole thing is staged. He's just a scapegoat. Now, Greenpeace is reporting that the oil spill from the oil tankers of the Shadow Fleet that were in the Kerch Strait that broke up over the weekend is causing an environmental disaster about 40 miles, about 60 kilometers long from the Kerch Strait to the Russian town of Anapa. And a local state of emergency has been declared there. And people are trying to get out and wash the seabirds down with ivory soap and haul buckets of the stuff away. How much has spilled is unclear. We know one tanker went down, and that tanker was loaded with 4,900 metric tons of bunker fuel. Bunker fuel is what runs ships. That's the fuel that ships run on. And the source of that bunker fuel is the port of Azov on the Sea of Azov. And the ships had just gotten their oil from there and were headed to refuel the Russian fleet. Now, if they were headed out through the Kerch Straits, it seems to me they were probably headed to the Mediterranean, where the Mediterranean fleet is stuck outside of the port of Tartus. And so it's not impossible that these ships were dispatched for that purpose. The Volgoneft 212 broke up, was destroyed, dumped its 4,900 metric tons into the Black Sea. That much we're sure of. The Volgoneft 239 appears to have run aground, and it's unclear whether or not the 4,000 metric tons in its cargo hold spilled or how much of that spilled. Then, now get this, there's a third tanker in the Black Sea, Sea of Azov area that suffered a leak as well, the Volga-Neft 109. That happened on Monday. It's unknown how much of the 3,000 metric tons that it was carrying spilled. So altogether, we could be looking at an environmental disaster of somewhere between 4,900 tons of ship fuel and 12,000 tons. That's 3 million gallons. 3 million gallons. And these three ships are not the only oil tankers of the Shadow Fleet that Russia had problems with this week. There's a fourth. The Mercury in the Pacific Ocean, its engine just stopped. Its engine just stopped. And rescue boats had to be dispatched to get out there and haul it in. There was no damage to the ship. Nobody was hurt. In the case of the Black Sea tanker going down, 4 crewmen were lost, presumed dead, and 1 was killed in the mishap. Now, so that's 4 Russian oil tankers that had significant problems this week. And there's going to be more. There's 600 of these rust buckets that Russia has working like horses, where they shouldn't be doing things they shouldn't be doing to try to evade sanctions and sell its poison to the world. Four ships, man. It's a bad week for Russia. Every week for the last 3 years has been a bad week for Russia. And it's going to get worse because Ukraine has just announced a new domestically produced missile system, the SAPSAM. The SAPSAM missile system is a small, fast cruise missile drone hybrid. It does 700 kilometers an hour. That's over 400 miles an hour. It's a long-range, jet-propelled cruise missile drone hybrid with a proprietary GPS and inertial navigation system. They showed it off again at the European Defense Conference and announced it this week. That's in addition to the Peklo, to the Polonitsia, and the Ruta, all of which are missile drone hybrids that offer the firing solutions to a number of strategic threats facing Ukraine. So, yeah, I love that for Ukraine. The Kim Jong-un regime in North Korea, according to reporting in the Wall Street Journal this week, received $315 million in cash. I'd like to know what kind of cash for the 11,000 troops that it ponied up. Now, what this amounts to, what this boils down to, is that Kim Jong-un believes that he has the right to sell the lives of 11,000 men and put the cash in his pocket. That's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with an autocrat like Kim Jong-un. He is a person who has no regard for human life except as it benefits him. And he turned those men's lives into cash. So for anybody who thinks that the dramatic losses that we're seeing in Kursk of North Korean soldiery is going to somehow pull Kim out of this deal, no. It's going to push him farther in. He's going to sell Putin 100,000 men next time and put the money right in his own pocket. For the arms, the roughly 2 to 5 billion in arms that North Korea is thought to have sent to Russia, they got cash, oil, and food, as well as rocket and missile technology. So Kim is making out like a bandit on this deal. North Korea has never been richer or had more food on its table. There was a lot of reporting yesterday that the North Korean troops were getting smashed up north in Kursk, but all the reports estimated that the KIA was like 30 to 50 people. That doesn't sound like decimated troops to me. Well, it turns out that that was only one engagement. That's the video that you might have seen of the North Koreans running across an open field, and then suddenly the cluster munitions start to hit them. 50 North Koreans were unalived in that attack alone. The Pentagon confirmed last night that that North Korean losses in Kursk are several hundred. Several hundred. I posted video on my Patreon today of at least 100 North Koreans in a hospital in the Kursk region, all of whom had been wounded in action and were dressed for some reason in civilian clothes in the hospital. Why were they dressed in civilian clothes, Daddy? Oh, we don't want anyone to know they're North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia, son. Ugh, so stupid. They gave them all Russian passports that claimed that they were southeastern Siberian people, not North Koreans. Russia doesn't know how to do anything without lying, I swear to God. Okay, the Trident laser weapon. The Ukrainians got this from the British. The British, we got confirmation today, the British ponied up and shared some prototypes of their Dragonfire weapon. And according to the Ukrainian armed forces, I swear to God, this is a real quote, verbatim, it really works, it really exists. It really works, it really exists. Now, we only have this guy's word on this, but according to him, this thing can shoot down planes 2 kilometers up. So let's hope they got them, and let's hope they are working the way that they claim that they are. The Kursk lodgment is faced today the third consecutive day of intense offensive maneuvers led by, or at least largely involving, North Korean soldiery. And we are seeing a terrible video of real losses among the North Koreans. Again, as of last night, the Pentagon confirms several hundred KIA and WIA North Koreans in Kursk. Now, in contrast to that, can I just point this out? Our boy Gerasimov is apparently alive. He actually did a press conference yesterday where he talked about recent events. So it looks like there is a Gerasimov and he's still alive. Interesting. I was sure that the Ukrainians got him, but I guess not. According to him, now get this, this is the best. The Ukrainians in Kursk have lost 1,800 tanks and armored vehicles and 43,000 soldiers. Now, it's interesting that he said 43,000 because that's the same number that Zelensky gave of the total number of Ukrainian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion. So Gerasimov said 43,000 and indicated that it was just in Kursk since August. These numbers are not real, right? To the best of our knowledge, the Ukrainians never even put... thanks, Craig. I really appreciate that. Though I would rather you join the Patreon if you haven't yet. I can't do anything. The Patreon is everything to me. And I hope that if you're on the Patreon, that the content that I post there is of value to you. But these days I'm posting a lot on Patreon that doesn't get posted anywhere else. So please get a free account. If nothing else, get a free account in case we lose TikTok. Hey, James Boudreau, how you living, man? Okay, so Gerasimov is alive and he's talking shit. Andre Yermak. Okay, a couple of things. On the subject of negotiations and peace talks, I think we have to acknowledge that Kyiv's rhetoric has shifted dramatically since Trump won the election. Kyiv is clearly setting itself up as the reasonable, good faith partner who's willing to make real concessions for the sake of peace. Andre Yermak today said negotiations will only be possible when Russia runs out of resources to continue its war. That is not a commentary on the reasonableness of the Ukrainians, but rather on the unreasonableness of the Kremlin. And I think he's right. And so the more reasonable that the Ukrainians are right now, the more they're going to have Trump on their side. I think that's the play. And it's a good play. Zelensky said, we cannot win the territories back by force. We need to have a diplomatic arrangement. Now, look, okay, listen, I'm going to say something, but I'm just going to say it to get it out of my head. All right? It's not real. I'm making it up. No one should believe what I'm about to say. But I don't think Zelensky really believes that. I think he's full of shit. I think he's playing like weak. And I think the Ukrainians have something up their sleeve. Now, I can't be right. I'm totally making that up. It's born of naivety. It's born of a hopeless optimism that I have. It's born of my deep faith that the Ukrainians can do anything. There is not going to be a Christmas offensive. I'm making that up in my head. That's not a real thing. But boy, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? It would be. It's much more likely that the reality is that Zelensky is facing the hard truths of this war. And he knows that everybody on the front line is tired, that they have been doing the impossible for so long with so little, and he would like to give them a break. And if that comes with security guarantees for the rest of the country, and it means giving up land that can't be had by force anyway, maybe it's for the best. It's far more likely that he is a rational person who is facing the hard realities than my imaginary scenario where any day now the Ukrainians are just going to pulverize and break the front line. That's not going to happen. That's, Bobby, the economic collapse of Russia at this point seems inevitable. Friday, the central bank has said it's going to raise interest rates to 23%. That's not going to go well. You're going to see record numbers of bankruptcies coming out of Russia in the first 2 quarters of the year. That's just what's going to happen. You're going to see growing societal pressures and instability in the society. So if Zelensky can freeze the conflict and then apply diplomatic pressure and wait out the economic collapse and the loss of Putin, then maybe the territories can be gotten back through negotiation. That may well be what he's thinking. And it's a reasonable thing to think. Far more reasonable than my silly idea that there's going to be a magical Christmas offensive that's just going to tear the shit out of the front line. Far less likely. I shouldn't have even said it out loud. I'm embarrassed at myself that I did. The Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong was in Kyiv today to reopen the Australian embassy. Lots of embassies here have reopened, including my own. The U.S. Embassy has reopened, and I'm very proud of that we are fully functional here with our allies on the ground and not bugged out. So I'm very grateful that we're here. That's not a story. Okay, the British MOD published figures for Russian vehicle losses. They tweeted today, Russia has lost since the start of the full-scale invasion 3,600 plus main battle tanks, 3,600 plus, 8,000 plus armored vehicles. This has led to a reliance on old, poorly maintained Soviet equipment, which we knew. And now, today, if you look at the British MOD's Twitter page, there are pictures of the old Soviet stockpile storage locations for tanks and armored vehicles, and they're empty. Like the before and after pictures are just stark contrast. They're gone. They're gone. Foreign Policy magazine published an article today called "The Russian War." Russian War is hitting. The Russian war economy is hitting its limits. The Russian war economy is hitting its limits. According to them, the Russians are losing an average of 155 armored vehicles a month, but can only produce 17 a month. The Russian army is losing about 320 tank and artillery barrels a month, but can only produce 20 barrels a month. I mean, it's a 15 times gap in what you need to what you got. And it can't go on. It can only go on until about the middle of next summer. And that's it. You know, I feel like Ukraine is so close. They're so close to a breakthrough in this thing. And war is all about lasting 15 minutes longer than your opponent. That clock is ticking. Tomorrow, we have this to look forward to. It's the annual Putin phone-in session. That's right. Tomorrow we'll be treated to a whole lot of boot-licking, ass-kissing, and brown-nosing, the kinds of which you only get in an authoritarian state that stages a press conference with the people. That's coming tomorrow. Clay Fry, you'll love this. You'll love this one, man. Kirollov has awarded himself the Golden Pen Award for supporting a superior free press in Chechnya. The Golden Pen Award for his free press in a Russian federal state where dissension isn't allowed, where there is no dissension, there are no competing voices. Hysterical. Yuri Fedenko, the head of the Achilles drone group, is once again reporting that Russian infiltration groups are coming into the Kyiv front dressed as Ukrainians. This is, of course, a war crime. It's a violation of one of the first principles of the Geneva Convention. You don't dress like the enemy and then shoot them in the back because they think you're friendly. That's not what you're supposed to do. And it is apparently what the Russians are doing from Kupiansk to Toretsk to Poltava. I'm sorry, to Pokrovsk. They're dressing in Ukrainian uniforms and trying to infiltrate that way. The AFU has regained ground in Chasiv Yar. It is thought now, guys, before the ban, before my most recent ban, somebody on the live one night was asking if glide bomb attacks were up or down. And I had read somewhere that they were up because the Russians didn't have as much artillery shells. That is no longer true. In fact, Since the U.S. gave the green light for ATACMS use in Russia, glide bomb sorties are down 70%. 70%. This is what the Ukrainians told us for the last year. If we could just use ATACMS on the airports where the glide bombs come from, we could stop the glide bombs. And sure enough, that seems to have happened. The Russians appear to have moved all of those critical air assets way back the fuck away from the front line, way out of ATACMS range, and it has impacted their ability to run sorties. And so the number of glide bombs dropped on Ukraine since the ATACMS green light was official is down by 70%. I'll do a video with the chart, but I think that that's incredible news. Gazprom, in financial news, the stock has hit its lowest point since the great financial crisis, the global financial crisis of 2008. It has dropped to below $1.06. It's down to about $1.03 a share, which makes it a penny stock. A penny stock. A company that used to deliver billions in profits every year is now losing billions every year and is a penny stock once again. Okay, and that is it for me. That's the headlines. Those are the headlines. Tonight, Tonight I want to make a special thank you. It's a little different from shares before the war. If I'm not mistaken, were about $16. So it's gone from 16 to 1. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. Although I'd have to look at a chart. I apologize. I'm not sure, Ethelred. Maybe if you could if you could pull up a 5-year chart and let us know, we'd have a better sense of it. Because now I'm not even sure if I'm even in the ballpark. Okay. I want to give a special thank you. You guys know I have some people at the front, and I wanted to do something nice for them. And so I wanted to bake 1,000 cookies for 100 men, and I couldn't do it alone. And a bunch of people stepped up, including James Boudreau, who was here earlier. I don't know if James is still here, but big thank you to James Boudreau, who stood up, to Vanetta Larrett, to Cheyenne, to Gabor, to Chris Carter, and Arn. Those were my cookie sponsors. And I mentioned them in all the cookie videos on the Patreon because I couldn't, just on ingredients alone, I've spent $300 so far. But we have now shipped out over 1,000 cookies already. The people I started doing this for, they haven't even gotten theirs yet. That's another 1,000 that's going to go out on Sunday. And then we just might be able to squeeze out another 1,000 before the first of the year. So I'm trying to get 3,000 cookies out. So big thanks to the people who made that possible. Thank you, James. I really appreciate it, man. And we're going to call them the sponsors of tonight's video, or tonight's live. So really appreciate it, everybody. And okay, anyway, if you want updates on the cookie project, just join my Patreon. That's a kind of behind the scenes thing more than anything. Okay. Big thanks, of course, to the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, Jay, and Travis. Thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. And thank you to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces. What is going on? What would you like to talk about tonight, mes amis? Mes amis, ça va bien? It is Christmas. Christmas is coming. I'm having a dinner here for just a few close friends on Christmas Eve. And then we're going to wrap presents. We have a bunch of presents to give out. And we're going to wrap those. And what are you guys doing for Christmas? Well, Kelly, that's not really what Zelensky is saying. What Zelensky's exact words were, if I'm not mistaken, were we recognize that we do not have what is necessary to take back our territories by force. We therefore must turn to a negotiated settlement to regain our territories, which we cannot give up under the Constitution of Ukraine. Vanetta's spending Christmas with the grandchildren. Grandchildren make Christmas. Flip is renovating the house. Got to keep the wife happy. Happy wife, happy life. Bobby's making tamales. Bobby, I'd love to have a tamale. Colin has a question. How many generals have been taken out by Ukraine? So, Colin, if I'm not mistaken, the short answer to this question is not as many as have been taken out by Putin. Putin cannot stand a competent general. So everyone that shows any degree of competence ends up dispatched, disappeared, or detained. Igor Girkin is in jail. Igor Girkin, the architect and executioner of the Donbass War, in jail. Surovikin, the architect of the Surovikin lines that held off the Ukrainian counteroffensive in summer of 2023. No, I'm sorry, summer of 2022. Wait. No, summer of 2023, sorry. Things are getting confusing. Surovikin, I mean, the list goes on. At last count, 28 Russian generals have been disappeared, dispatched, or detained by Putin. Forget about the ones that the Ukrainians have taken out. Putin has done more damage to his own hierarchy than the Ukrainians have at this juncture. If you Google, I'd kind of be interested to know how many generals, but there are some open source intelligence that keep track of how many officers Russia has lost in this conflict. If you Google Russian officers lost in Ukraine, there should be a number there for generals. I wouldn't mind it if you shared it. Did anybody look up the price of Gazprom from 4 years ago? Good night, Eli. Thank you. Why hasn't Ukraine taken back land that was stolen by Russia? Well, Bip, they have, right? I mean, in March of 2022, Russia held 30% of Ukraine. At the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia held 30% of Ukraine. The Ukrainians have taken back 12% of the country, and Russia now holds only 18%. Plus, they've taken about 800 square kilometers in Kursk. So, in my mind, your question is ill-phrased because they have taken it back. Now, the Donbass front, if the question is why aren't they making progress there? It's because they're outmanned and outgunned. Simple as that. So it is less damaging to you to defend than it is to try to advance. And I keep coming back to this. It's so stupid. I'm going to be wrong about this. And you can all hold me accountable when I'm wrong about it. But it does seem to me, and it's winter in Donbass, right? So things are not moving. Japan says 20 generals killed in Ukraine. 20. And Putin, I said, has taken out 28 or 29. So like I said, more than that. $364 rubles to 108 today. 364 how long ago? Because I feel like that was during the war. That's before the war. Still, that's a third of the price. It's lost 2/3 of its market cap. That's a significant number. Because since the war, I thought the high, that's the 2021 high. Okay. So it's down by 66%. It's down by about 66%. Significant. I'm glad we checked because as soon as I said it, I knew that was wrong. Anyway, I don't know that it has to, but it would certainly make it easier, right? You see what Bip is saying there? So Russia has to implode before Ukraine can get its land back. We wouldn't look. Nobody wants it to be that way. But as long as Russia's war economy continues to make this obscenity possible, and the Russians are not inclined to negotiate a settlement, if they wanted the war to stop, they could stop it right now. They're the aggressors. Come on. So as long as they're going to continue this pace, that may be the only thing that Ukraine has to look forward to. The lower valuation of the ruble is a fair point. The fact that the currency has also lost 30% of its value is a real thing. Any news on the new Ukrainian ICBM? So it's not an ICBM, right? It's not an intercontinental, the Ukrainians are not producing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Instead, what they're doing is they're hybridizing the best of their drone technology with the best of their missile technology to produce some of the most low-cost cruise missiles that the world has, cruise and ballistic missiles that the world has ever seen. And we don't have anything new on it, just that, well, actually, it may be news that the Pelko and the Polonitsa have both entered serial production. I hear the air alarms are going off. It's winter, so the windows are closed. You won't be able to hear it, but the air alarms are starting to go off. Would someone please show Ja to the door for repeating nonsense Russian propaganda? Thank you. Blaming this war on the West is, and when I see Westerners buy into it, it is the most masochistic kind of self-flagellation I can imagine. And it is ahistorical nonsense. The new ballistic missile, which one? The Peklo, the Ruda? I think they're both, wait. No, they're cruise, I'm sorry. Ballistic missile. The Neptune. The Neptune program. I don't know anything new about the Neptune program. Or the Polonitsa. Other than the Polonitsa has entered serial production. Is Hanukkah started already? Is it Hanukkah? Yep, John, they sure do, and it is fantastic. Truth hurts, thank you, 100%. I'm with Cheyenne. Hanukkah starts on December 25th. Okay, I thought it was still a week away. Okay. Let's see, what time is it? How are we doing on time? Okay, we got 4 minutes. So again, Mel, it does look as though the British Dragonfire laser weapon, it appears as though British military intelligence delivered to the Ukrainians some prototypes, and the Ukrainians went to work on them. And the Ukrainians now have a laser weapon, is what it appears to be. And I'm sure everything they learn on the battlefield, they are communicating to their British counterparts. You can be sure of that. Hey, Kansas Steve. So again, I want to thank the cookie sponsors. Thank you guys. We made a small difference and brought smiles to the face of a couple hundred guys, or will be bringing those smiles to their faces. And again, that was James Boudreau, Chris Carter, Arn, Vanetta Larrett, Gabor, and Cheyenne. Thank you guys all. We don't even know that they're using those weapons yet. The only claim that has been made so far is that they have them, that they are real and that they work. It's the only claim that's been made. Thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server and the Alexievich archive, and big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces. Ukraine is doing a fine job building their own cruise missiles. Fine job. Glad to be back. Well, Nightshade, I mean, again, there's a big difference between having a weapon and creating a capability, right? And those Dracaris drones are something else, boy. But Colin, I think you're right. It's a testing ground. Ukraine has become a testing ground for everybody's weapons, for North Korean ballistic missiles, for British laser weapons, for drone technology from a dozen countries. Yeah, it is. No, Dracaris is that thermite drone. It's the drone that drops the thermite, which burns very, very hot and just vaporizes anything below it. Yep, I'm very excited. I have to tell you, my Patreon is back up to $1,400 a month. I'm making $1,400 a month these days, guys, which is very nice. It would change my life quite a bit if I could get it up to $2,000. I got to tell you. So if anybody out there can throw me $5 a month, please join the Patreon. And if you can't, join the Patreon anyway, because if TikTok goes away, I'm going to want a way to be in touch and an audience for my content. Well, Bobby, the good news is that the Biden administration says that Ukraine is set for 2025, that they have Trump-proofed the aid, if you will. And see, part of this nonsense in my head about a Christmas offensive comes from that Pentagon report, right? And Jake Sullivan saying that they were going to deliver hundreds of thousands of shells to Ukraine before the 20th of January. Now, if suddenly Ukraine has hundreds of thousands of extra shells and the Russians don't, and the Russians can't get the replacement barrels, then I think if the Ukrainians hit them hard with classic artillery as the god of war, they could smash the Russian front line. That's what I think. I really do. Now, I'm an amateur. I don't know shit about shit. And I am a hopeless optimist. So nobody should believe that that's going to happen. I don't even believe it's going to. I do believe it's going to happen. It's so stupid. I'm going to be disappointed again. Oh. Very hard trucking in the winter, but this is a cold winter. So far, it's much colder than last December here. And that means the ground you're going to get a hard freeze this year that we didn't really get last year, is what it looks like. Now, weather is fickle. It could change. That could all change. But they get a hard freeze. They get a hard freeze and enough ammo, I'm telling you, I have absolutely every faith that the Ukrainian armed forces could smash that line. And I think once it gets smashed in one spot, I don't think it's going to hold anywhere else. There's not a reserve of patriotic Russians that are going to hold the line at that point. Well, we don't have any idea what Trump is going to do. That's the problem with Trump. And at this point, European aid to Ukraine is 3 times that of the U.S. 3 times now. So, yeah, I would think so, James, right? And those barrels, they got a life expectancy of 2,000 shells. There's probably not a barrel on the front that hasn't fired 4,000 at this point. Exactly, Norbert. That's what a hard freeze means. And so anyway, guys, it's 1 o'clock in the morning here in Kyiv. I got to get to bed. I got a long day tomorrow. I got some cookies to bake. And I will talk to you all tomorrow. Take care, everybody.